But you've
All
also
right.
covered how we've said it's bioidentical. It's the
Yep.
same base hormone as your body. That's why we sort you know how it's going to re we have some kind of idea how it's going to react because you've already had some in your body. That's why going back to why it's the safest to start with.
Yep.
Um,
We want to talk
so
about the
let's
suppression.
oh yeah, okay, talk about how it suppresses natural levels and then talk about how it actually works to build muscle.
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to taking testosterone as well, you need to keep in mind that when you are taking exogenous testosterone, it is suppressing your LH and FSH, which is essentially the two chemicals in your body that encourages your body to create testosterone itself. So when you
They're
add in
also
that,
the sex hormones,
yeah,
luteinizing hormone,
exactly.
follicle stimulating hormone.
Yep, yep. So these are the things that are creating sperm in your body. Those are the things that are regulating hormones, etc. So, and it's not just testosterone that lowers that. It's any form of anabolic that is suppressive in nature. So, SARMs, the whole box and dice, they all do it in some way. Now, once that LH and FSH drops down, you're going to see like the testes are going to atrophy. Your testosterone's going to plummet. You're going to see like catabolism, fatigue, depression, losing your gains. There's a myriad of things that can occur, right? So those are all things that we want to avoid. So you might potentially look at using a PCT post cycle, or you might potentially look at staying on testosterone replacement depending on what you want to do in the future and why you're using anabolics in the first
Mhm.
place. So, being aware that any sort of PED like testosterone is going to be suppressive and it is going to shut down that H2PA axis is incredibly important. A lot of people aren't aware of like the consequences of that, right? Like most people will recover their axis if they do a proper post-cycle therapy. There are, however, some people that won't. And I know some people that haven't, with long-term use. Short-term use usually isn't too much of an issue, but when you're seeing that really long-term suppression of LH and FSH, it's quite hard to turn those back on.
It is.
When you're not using those cells all the time, it's like, all right, cool. I haven't been used in 5 years. It's
So,
like, why would I want?
so just a quick question then. When people are on TRT, obviously, do you tell people when they start to expect us to stay on it forever? Because if you need it, then just stay on it. And then
Yeah.
obviously it's different for people that blast and cruise or bodybuilders like us, where we might want to come off one day and not rely on TRT, but inevitably we probably will. So
Yeah.
it's a
So
different type of thing. When you're on TRT, if you are going purely just on TRT, you're pretty much doing it that you knowing that you never reboot it again, unless you want a
so
kid quickly. But generally most people take it post kids.
yeah, so it depends on what you're doing it for, really. There's like three different versions of what we'd call TRT, right? There's the guy that has no testosterone that's doing it for medical reasons. Then there's the guy that wants to optimize his hormones because maybe he's middle of the range and he wants to be at the top. Maybe he's an athlete, he
Yeah.
wants to look good and feel good all the time. And then we have people that, might be bodybuilders and they are doing cycles and then just coming back down to a TRT dose. So how you come off or if you come off is dependent upon which one of those three things you are, right? So if you're a guy that is on TRT medically, you aren't coming off. There's no reason to come off. If you come off, your testosterone's probably going to go to zero again. There's no reason for that. If you are a guy that's using TRT for, performance boosting, you might be, say, an older person, you're in your 40s, maybe you don't feel as good as what you used to. Generally, in those cases, you're going to stay on.
Mm.
They might be the people that aren't working with a clinic. Maybe they're, using like a UGL and just doing their own blood work and working with a coach, versus say the person that's using medically approved is probably going to be working with, an endocrinologist and getting it through that process. Then you have the third option, right? Which is the guys that are running cycles and then coming back down to TRT. For those guys, more than likely, if they are bodybuilders, like let's use you for an example, right? Like by the time you're going to retire, you'll have done so many cycles that coming off will probably be unlikely. And also with your age, like if you're 40 years old and you've been, running gear for 20 years, you're probably not going to recover. So you're going to need to do a PCT. But, if
I
you're
think at that point as well, if you're running gear that long, you don't want to feel natural anyway. You've been
no,
living up
no,
here so long.
yeah. But, it depends. I know some guys that do. Like, there's a lot of big time IFBB pros
Well,
that
we
have
also
come
do get
out
sick of fucking
or come off.
needles.
Yeah, that too. I can tell you now, man, like I'm so overstabbing myself. Like
Mm.
I hate doing it. And it's
Um,
like there'll be weeks where my testosterone replacement doesn't get done.
mm,
You know, 2 or 3 weeks, I'm just like, I fucking would rather shoot myself than pin
yeah,
myself. So, that's another aspect that people need to take on board is that this is something that can potentially be lifelong.
yeah. TRT can come in creams and that, but they are very mild.
Yeah, not only that, but like even if you're getting like an android gel or like a compounded cream, they don't absorb very well.
Yeah.
They come with other issues too
And
around
you can
red blood
don't
cells.
don't hold your daughter's hand or whatever. They can
I
get
know
tests. Like,
the
it's actually a thing.
transfer.
It's you got to be careful.
Yeah, so there's actually a example recently of a guy that would rub it on his chest.
Yeah,
Yeah, he had a little girl and he'd hold her on his
that's why I
chest.
brought it up.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really sad. I was like, oh, poor little thing. So those are obviously things that you need to be aware of. So,
So,
like it's great to be like, I feel awesome now, but it's like you need to think long term as well.
mm. So go
Like if you're doing this for medical reasons, it's fine.
yeah, go back to the muscle building pathways of testosterone. Just like don't go to just so people understand that yeah, when you take it, obviously protein turnover.
Yeah, I wrote myself like a bunch of
Oh, okay.
notes so I can make sure that I'm
Well,
right with
while you're
everything.
looking at that, I'll just quickly tell people what just go over a few points that we've already covered that I just want to reiterate. People think low dose is safe. It's not. It's can be this high or low can have both the same consequences. Dose matters to is all individual. Genetics, aromatase, activity, lifestyle, sleep, like I said, we all covered them. Side effects that don't come from testosterone and mismanaged that come from as side effects like the estrogen imbalance, the hematocrit, blood pressure, sleep apnea, like you said,
Oh, there's a
the
million, man.
psychological vitality.
Yeah. Kill
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, same things. So you got to. This is why, like you were saying, like make sure the first time someone helps you monitor because there's things you won't be able to see that, especially how you act, that your coach will pick up on.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not even the physiological side effects. Sometimes it's the psychological, and it's like I know myself, I'm impacted by just my TRT dose.
Mm,
And there's going to be people out there that are impacted way more than I am, and that might be different during different phases of what you're doing. I know guys that have, sadly killed themselves because professional bodybuilder, got to a point where couldn't do cycles or anything anymore, felt like they were losing their identity, ended their life.
mm,
So it's like, these are things that you really have to think about long term because anytime you are playing with hormones, you really are playing with your brain.
mm,
Not only in how you feel, but also, long term things like Alzheimer's.
mm,
You know, Steroids are neurotoxic. So
mm,
it's like when you're taking more steroids, it is toxic to your brain.
mm.
So it's like if you don't want to get Parkinson's disease when you're, 50 years old or 40 years old, don't abuse Tren.
Yeah,
These are things that have to be thought about long term.
we're talking about tests. Let's worry about the
Yeah,
TREM.
yeah. But
Yeah,
even test,
yeah,
like
test.
even test, right, is neurotoxic
Mm,
in high doses. So it's like those things need to also be taken into
mm,
account. So it's like it's great to worry about the physiological side effects, but also taking
mm.
into account the psychological effects.
Yeah.
And it's like you
Did you
take
have that
steroids.
the muscle building thing now? Is
That's
that
what
okay?
I'm
You got
getting
into
into
it?
right
Okay.
now.
I'll let you roll on.
You ready for this segue? You
Oh,
ready?
I'm ready, man. I'm ready. Let's go.
And the reason why we do take steroids is because, of course, to promote the tissue build, right? Because you want to
Yes.
get bigger, to
This
feel
is
good
where
about
people are
yourself.
going to start listening now. It's
Yeah,
just
see, I'm slick
building.
with that. I'm good. So like obviously, we have nitrogen improvement, we're gonna have that muscle protein synthesis increase via mTOR. So, these are all things that are going to increase the level of tissue that you have, but not only the level of tissue, but also other things within your body. So that might be a deeper voice, hair growth, potentially prostate enlargement, but the main effect that we want from it is going to be that tissue growth. And it's like you're looking for an anabolic that has a low risk profile, that has not has, is bioidentical. Testosterone is going to be the first choice because, and it should always be the first choice because it's always considered a test base, right? So that's going to provide the tissue growth, that's going to provide the hormone base level, that's going to provide the health base level that you need. So it's like all of those things in combination are going to allow you to grow faster. So the way that it works is essentially you take testosterone, it binds to the androgen receptor, it translocates to the nucleus of the cell, it increases MPS and via
which
mTOR
is
and
muscle
essentially,
protein synthesis.
yep, which essentially allows you to take nutrients, so things like glycogen, nitrogen, all that sort of fun stuff, and build tissue faster, repair cells faster, be stronger because you can actually store further amounts of glycogen than what you would as a normal
And
person.
more blood and
Yep,
water, which
absolutely.
is
So, you know,
nutrients. Your blood is
yeah,
the
so all
nutrient.
those things are considered nutrients like within the body. Um,
We actually,
and
that's
with
just let me quickly bring that up. I didn't even think about that, which is another good point to consider. Is if you are on a fat loss journey and you're taking tests to help you maintain muscle weight cut, you will possibly gain a bit of weight when you first start taking tests because of the water retention.
Yeah, and
You know,
not just the water retention, but like water retention, glycogen
yeah,
retention, you know, all that stuff.
yeah,
So, sorry, I'm gonna sneeze really bad.
that's right.
Oh
Yes. So
God.
you're talking about the nucleus, mTOR, and MPS,
Uh,
cellular hydration.
yeah, and honestly, that's pretty much how it works.
Yeah,
So it's like
it's like it's complicated, but at this
it's
level to explain to
it's
people,
really
that's
not.
basically it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's really not that complicated.
yeah.
Like when it comes to like a basic hormone like testosterone, that MPS is basically the main benefit that you're going to see from it. It's
Because
not
that's
going to,
what naturally happens in your body. We're just making instead of
yeah,
it happening at
exactly.
like a 10, we're making it happen at like a depending on the dose, maybe a 15.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing when it comes to like myths around steroids, right? Everyone thinks it's like some sort of like magic pill, but it's just an amplification of what you're
Mm,
already doing. So if you have your training in spot, you have your nutrition in spot, and you add a PED like testosterone, and you're gonna see like more, right?
mm,
Like you're only gonna get more of what you're already doing. So if you're someone that doesn't have those in place, you're not gonna see anything from it really, other than like a little temporary boost.
mm.
And it's like those are the people that you see that, you know, will take testosterone for a small period of time and they get a little bigger. They get that extra fullness. And then as soon as they lower that dose or they come off it, it's gone.
It's
You
like
know,
if for people, I guess maybe a simple analogy, especially people in the cars, it's like having a say an acceleration limiter on your car. Say you can only accelerate to 40%.
yeah,
And then all of
yeah.
a
It
sudden
just removes
now
that.
you put test in, you can accelerate to 50%.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, like this is
And
the
car's
thing,
still
like
doing the
everyone,
exact same thing. You can just put the
yep.
pedal down further now.
Yeah, and that's why like as coaches when we talk about, you know, like when you're training, you can dig a hole that you can recover from.
Mm. To an
Testosterone or
extent. To an
yeah,
extent.
testosterone or anabolics will just like increase that slightly.
Yeah.
Some people are like, it's going to increase it drastically, and it's like it does, but it's not going to allow you to train 4 times a
Yeah.
day.
The
You
problem
know,
is if
there's a
you're
limit.
training here naturally and then you take tests and you're training here, you're still at the same spot. You can just train a
Yeah,
bit heavier. It doesn't mean you can do more volume. All your weights are all of a sudden heavier. You're on a more stimulus but same amount of sets.
yeah, exactly. You
Yeah.
know, and it's like that volume might not increase, but that mechanical tension load is
Mm-hmm.
probably going to increase,
Mm-hmm.
and through that, along with that MPS, you're going to see an improvement in the way that you grow tissue. And you're not going to put on kilos and kilos of muscle in a week, right?
Mm.
This is the biggest issue that I see with people when they take
Small
PEDs for the first
surpluses,
time.
small gains.
Because you're just going to get fat otherwise, right? Because
Well, look at the muscle. Like I think the max you can grow in like a month is probably like 400 to 500 grams, depending on where you're at in your career. Yeah,
if
if
you're
you're
lucky,
lucky. Yeah, but like
I
five
can.
kilos a year of tissue.
So I've got Megan's like great growth rate from her whole training period from
Mhm.
when she started, because I was, you know, I was with her when she started competing to the time that she turned pro, and on average it was 80 grams per week.
Yeah, that's good. Because if you add
She
that,
has
what's that
she
every
has good
year?
genetics.
That's
So
good.
she started at 62 and she was 72 kilos on stage by the time she had done 5 years.
But hang on, that's 80 onto 0.8 because that's 800. Yeah, so times 52. Yeah, that's 4 kilos a year. That's good. Her frame at that percentage is 60. That's a lot.
Yeah,
If a guy can put on if a guy my size can put on 4 kilos of lean tissue a year, that's good.
yeah. But the problem is, right, like you also have to take into account prep, right? So if you're in
Yeah.
prep, you're not really building no muscle,
No, you're not.
you know?
You're retaining your muscle.
Yeah, yeah. And there'll be like freaks, right? there's some guys out there that will take anabolics and maybe they haven't experienced the higher load and they will grow a bit faster. But it's like generally any time that you're in a calorie deficit, you're not really going to see any growth. So that's why when it comes to,
Unless you've never taken anything and the first time you take something is going into a prep. That's
yeah,
another ball game.
yeah. Well, as a prime example, that was Meg's. So, like the first time she ever took anything, it was actually TRT. She'd been on birth control since she was, I think, 14 years old or something. So her testosterone over that time had, of course, been like heavily suppressed,
Yeah.
to the point where it was nearly zero. It was zero point 0.2 for total test.
I'm not a big fan of the puree.
It depends on who you are. Some people are fine on it, some people aren't. Generally, if you're a client, I'm going to ask you why you're on it, and if you have
But
like
But
a good
another thing I
reason.
want to bring up is if you're on the pill, that's the same as like that's taking a drug test. Like they think, yeah, people say, oh, you're
Yeah.
on TRT or whatever. But what do you think the pill is? It's a hormone
Yeah.
regulator. You know what I mean? Like
It's just
people get blown
estrogen and
away by that. I'm like,
progesterone.
yeah, it's like everyone fucking your family slams you for taking tests, but then all of a sudden they want to lose weight and they take Reddit. You're like, oh, it's all right. Well, you want to
Yeah.
do it?
Your mum's at the doctor getting a statin
Yeah,
because their cholesterol's a little high, but it's like, hey, have you dieted? Nah,
yeah,
nah.
nah,
But this is gonna harden all the stuff in my arteries, so I have a heart attack fast. It's like,
yeah. But I can't. But you can't take tests when you have low tests. Everyone hates it. So
yeah,
I don't do this. You know why? It's just because the government doesn't want you to be happy.
yeah. And look, I'll tell you, man, like
Yeah, go back
myself,
to Megan. Megan, you
oh
were
yeah,
saying
sorry.
about
Like for Megs,
Megs. It's
you
Megan,
know,
isn't it?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. She had really, really low test, right? And
yeah.
it's like, we're like, okay, we talked to the doctor about it, and they're aware of my situation. I can't
Mm,
really have kids and stuff. So I asked her, I was like, what do you want to do? And she's like, oh, well, like I'll just try the cream. And she's on the 1% andro
mm,
cream. Um, Hormone levels went back to normal, like just, high normal.
yeah,
And she put on like 3, 4 kilos
yeah.
in the span of one like off
Of
season.
good weight. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yep, yep. And I was like, all right, cool. Let's kind of see, how that transfers across into prep. And in the prep, just kept getting bigger and kept growing. And it's like we kind of got to this point where her weight, just wasn't going down anymore. And I was like, all right, cool. Like we're getting leaner, so we'll just leave things how they are.
win-win.
And yeah, like she just kept getting leaner and getting leaner, and that was, her last prep there, and she ended up being like 73 kilos, I think, when we went to Korea, which, for a
Geez,
woman,
that's big. That's
that's
big. How tall
that's
is
fucking
she?
big, bro. 5'9".
Okay, she's a bit tall, but still, that's still big. That's big muscle weight.
She
And
keeps
that's you're talking about like 10%, 10, 12% body fat.
she was 8% or
Oh,
7 to 8% on a DEXA,
mm.
which is low for a chick.
Oh, extremely. Because a girl looks shredded way different than a guy. Because obviously, depending on the size of their tits as well. Because that's obviously
Yeah.
fat. But yeah,
Well,
like
she had striated glutes,
yeah, at
like
that weight, that's
like
that's
top to
that's
top to
that's
bottom.
huge. That's big muscle
Yeah.
mass. 73 kilos, 5'9".
And that's like I'll tell you now, man, like the wellness girls, like from a muscularity standpoint, like she's not competitive with the
Mm,
pros, like because they are between 5 foot and 5'3",
yeah,
and it's like you can't compete with someone that weighs the same amount of you and is 6 inches short.
yeah.
And there's a funny photo of it on my Instagram if they want to scroll through and have a look where Megan and Emily were competing with each other, Emily King
Emily
bodies.
King.
Yeah, and Emily's quite short and compact and Megan's really tall, and it was
Mm,
just like it was so funny because they look, kind of similar but different in their own sort of
yeah,
ways. And it just looked like Megan had like taken her little kid to compete with
yeah,
her,
yeah. 'Cause Emily's got the same coach as Beans, Luke Miller.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Luke,
yeah,
I think it
Luke
is.
Miller.
Yeah. And like Emily's fucking serious athlete, man. Like she's a fucking
Mm.
tank, like she's
Is
tough
she,
as
is she
fuck.
is she retired now with Matt, or is she going to keep competing? I don't even know.
Oh, I don't even know, man, to be honest. I got no idea. I think they said something about they might be having another kid or something. So,
Oh yeah, that's right.
I'm sure that she'll be taking a fair bit of time off with that. But yeah, like it was just funny to see like two very different examples of like two competitors on
Mm.
stage, It was like, all right, cool. Here's like example A of like a tall, probably more aesthetic version of a wellness competitor versus like a shorter, more compact, heavily muscled version of a wellness competitor. It was
Mm.
really, really cool. So, yeah,
Yeah,
but like, these are things that are similar to what it's like to take testosterone, right? Because everyone has their own genetics.
Mm,
So it's like you need to understand that the expression that taking something like testosterone is going to have on your body is going to be wildly different to someone else.
mm,
Because it's like, you know, everything is genetic response.
yeah. So
So,
I'll just quickly brush over a few things. I'm not even going to get into like frequency of pitting and stuff like that. We'll worry about that another time. But obviously we've covered TRT is not the same as a cycle. TRT is obviously still illegal if you do it the wrong way. You can go to the right clinics. Yeah, cruise and
yeah, that
TRT, cruise and TRT are different as well. If you're cruising, doesn't mean it's TRT because, like you said, we can have sports TRT. Um,
mm,
Once you start, you can stop. Obviously, depending on how much your body bounces back, that could be an issue.
yeah.
Which we'll talk about on another time. Like that's something I wrote down was PCT. I didn't. That's something we can cover in another episode. Um, so obviously, like you were saying, the dose depends on your goal. You know, whether you're on TRT or you're taking actually going to take cycles. And we've
Yep.
covered like libido. We did cover libido. It's I don't want to cover libido because that can people. Some
So
people go up, some people can go down. It depends on your dieting phase. Like that, the libido can vary.
libido is very complicated. It's very
Yeah,
multifaceted
I
because
don't want to get into that because that's not just to do with test.
it's not just physiological, it's
Yeah,
also psychological.
yeah,
I have competitors that have perfect blood work.
mm,
Dick doesn't work. And I'm like,
yeah.
are you stressed? And they're like, yeah, immensely. And I'm like, that's probably why.
Actually, I'll write that down. Libido can be another thing.
Yeah, we can
We
cover
can go
that.
over that another because that's yeah, like you were saying with the dials. You change one thing, that's a whole nother fucking thing you can go.
Yeah,
Obviously, we talked about mood, cognition. Um,
yeah.
it's not test isn't designed for physique enhancement. It's designed for replacing TRT. That we've just took it that way.
This is a complicated argument that people make now, and I see like especially because of like there was like the old school train of thought, right? Because I've been into bodybuilding for so long now, like I've kind of seen like all the different stages, and it's like there was a point in time where say like the Ronnie and Jay era, right?
Yeah,
I'll give like an example of like a cycle structure for them. So they would use something like a testosterone and an EQ. So then it sort of moved from that to a more of like a safer model version, right? Which is when people were looking at more like things like testosterone and DHT injectables, so Primobolan and Masteron. And that occurred purely because of the fact that, they could get access to that at the time.
yeah.
Maybe for Jay and Ronnie, Primo was hard to get at that point in time, so they weren't using it. So it's like, and then
Might
now
not even been known about back then for bodybuilding.
Primobolan you could get through your doctor for a long period of time, and then it kind of got hard to get because they weren't really giving it out. So that later stage, it was expensive compared to EQ.
Mhm.
Guys felt that they grew faster on EQ. It provided the same AI effect that Primobolan gave, so they were sort of happy about like swapping over to that because cheaper too, right? Like at the end of the
Mhm.
day, people are going to get what they can afford, what they can use, and what they can get their hands on. So it's like people then move to this safer use model is what fucking Victor Black Eye likes to talk about. Um, but it's like people were already doing that. There were guys that use those multiple compounds, and it's like I know there's a lot of coaches out there now that are saying like, oh, like test is just like a base hormone. Testosterone will grow fucking muscle tissue like nothing else.
Test is
Like
best.
I'm telling you now, you look at them guys in the 90s and stuff, they were cranking, high doses of testosterone and they're all really big. You look at someone like Dallas McCarver, obviously RRP, but he was huge.
Mm,
If you ever saw him in person, he was fucking massive.
mm.
And he was a guy that would just run huge doses of testosterone, way too high, way too high. But he absolutely grew from it. And it's like this is why I kind of like
It's
get
also
a bit.
genetics as well, plus test.
Yeah, and this is why I kind of like get bound up a little bit on it. I'm like, yeah, like there's probably better choices to make. Like maybe if you have access to a lot of Primobolan, just using Test and Primo is probably going to be great. But it's like that testosterone is still going to grow tissue because the testosterone itself is anabolic.
Yeah, providing
Like
you give it like you said before,
you provide
providing you have a
stimulus, of
stimulus.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it is going to, upregulate MPS, and that is going to allow you to grow. It's like is there a point of diminishing returns? Of course.
Mm.
And that's why we talk about when someone's taking a cycle, you have to be working with a coach because they're going to understand that point. They're going to understand like, all right, cool. This is the time to pull this lever. This is the time to pull this lever. This is the time to pull this one. And
Even
that
time to
comes
pull
about,
back.
yeah, and that comes about from experience, right? Like over time, especially if you're someone that has been using P.E.D.s yourself, as well as in combination with the education that you have, you can see what's happening and then you understand why it's happening and you're like, all right, cool. It's time to do this for this reason, or it's time to do this for that reason. And this comes back to like why I always say to people, I'm like, everything should be done for a reason, like I just don't sit down on my computer and say, hey, take fucking 10 grams of gear because I feel like it. It's like, all right, cool. Let's start at the minimal effective dose and titrate up to a point where you're growing and just stay there,
Yeah.
and then be like, all right, cool. You've stopped growing. Can we add in a little bit more food? If you're getting fatter rather than growing, all right, cool. We'll add in a little bit more
Mm.
anabolic support. And this is why I get like a bit up in arms about it because obviously I'm not a big fan of Victor. I think that he's a fuckwit. And I'll gladly publicly say that. In fact, I am right now. And everyone needs to understand that these things have been around since the 60s and earlier, right? Like they've been tried in every single possible way, every single possible combination. The combination that works best for you is not going to work best for everyone
It's
else.
funny that you say that been around, test's been around for so long, yet it's still like, oh, you take TRT. But yet,
Yeah.
Monjaro or whatever, all the GLP-1s have been out. Obviously, they've actually been, people don't even know, but they've actually been out for a long time.
Oh, yonks,
But
man.
but approved for like, people and like being used in the medical industry is only short. And like
Yeah.
people jump on them straight away, but they don't even question it. Why do they only question it? They just
Well, I
hate
can.
it.
So the reason why that came about, right, is the FDA started this whole thing about steroids is cheating and steroids is bad for you after we had the home run war in the States.
Yeah.
When them boys were fucking smacking them balls out of the field, all of a sudden they were like, couldn't figure out why. And then when they finally figured out that it was due to steroids, it was fucking game over.
Yes, was it
You know?
the Germans invented the D-bolts to beat America in the Olympics?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The German weightlifting team loved the D-balls, man, like
D-bolt
shitloads.
is we'll get into that another. I'm not a big fan of
Yeah, it's
D-bolt
a
because
whole,
it's strength and water retention, but we'll get into that. That's another
yeah.
subject.
But
Um,
like this is like a thing that's come from the government. This is in education
yeah, but it's
through.
also they want society to have a little bit of suppressed so they can maintain control. If every man was on test, there'd be a lot more uproar, especially in today's situations.
Yeah, yeah, probably, but it's more so the fact that they wanted to control things in not so much a political aspect, but more so in how they appear.
Mm,
Because obviously MLB is like a huge American pastime. When it came out that people were juicing, they were pissed about it. So
mm,
all of a sudden they were like, "Nah, fucking testosterone's bad, blah blah blah. Let's throw fucking labels on all this stuff." They were teaching it in schools that fucking steroids are bad. Don't say no to drugs. The whole DARE program. Um, and then obviously through that fear mongering over time, people sort of learnt from the government incorrect information that basically told them that if they had high testosterone, it would lead to heart disease, it would lead to all these things. And it's like a replacement dose of testosterone is not a
yeah,
cycle of
yeah.
testosterone, like it's not going to give you that same side
It's like
effect
the whole
profile.
cholesterol egg thing and the whole sugar.
Yeah, exactly.
But
And
people
it's
are
like,
still brainwashed to this day. They still
yeah,
believe in all these myths.
yeah. And these things they're starting to turn around now, like we've just seen recently with the American
Yeah, the
Food
new food,
Association,
yeah, food
they've
thing.
changed their pyramid the other
Yeah,
way
yeah,
around. FDA have removed warning labels from TRT now, saying that, it actually is safe.
yeah.
Um, Steroids were legal here in Australia till 2000. Until the Sydney Olympics, you could literally go to the vet over the counter, buy testosterone propionate in a bladder. You could buy stanozol in a RWR vial. You could go to your doctor and say, "Hey, I want to feel good when I go to the gym,"
Yeah.
and they would give you Primobolan.
Mm.
This was the
Oh,
thing.
we're getting a bit sidetracked now, but we'll get back on
We can add
track.
that stuff in.
Yeah, we'll get back on track 'cause we'll blow out of time. But yeah, we've covered obviously getting blood work. We've covered symptoms, repeated testing, and obviously why you need repeat testing. A single test might be an outlier.
Yep.
You've covered the HPTA suppression, fertility implications, obviously long-term monitoring, and yeah, the TRT clinics where you can get it through a clinic or doing it, like you said, with UGLs, which is underground labs. And now